Lisa Costello, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you. Just to go through a brief biography on yourself. So you were born and raised in Philly.
That's right.
Went to school at Florida State, FSU for college.
Yep.
In Tallahassee, Florida.
And
graduated with a degree in psychology from there. Moved to Las Vegas back in 2009. You've been there ever since.
Yeah.
You're a covert stutterer for your entire life, you said, until maybe about 30 or so. And then we'll get into details of what happened after that point.
Sure.
You currently work for a gaming law firm there in Vegas. And
yeah, right.
You had said before the show that they kind of recruited you, or you ended up there because you've also played a good bit of professional poker in your life, and they needed somebody that really understood it from the player side.
Yep. I wasn't even looking for a new job at the time, but a mutual friend who I played poker with referred me to this attorney, and ended up working out perfectly.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. I don't know. Now, granted, I don't live in Vegas, so maybe I wouldn't know people if I lived there, but I've never met anybody that trying to think if I ever met a professional poker player before. I'm not sure if I have, much less one that, got a job at a law firm as a result of being a poker player.
Yeah.
It
was pretty cool.
It's cool. As far as your hobbies go, you like to travel, you like to cook, and in fitness activities as well.
So
it's good to have hobbies for sure. So just kind of diving into it. So you said prior to the age of 30, you were a covert stutterer. So you were doing your best to come across as fluent, which I would say the vast majority of us have spent a lot of time trying to do that. In my case, I was kind of too severe to pull that off, in childhood especially. But so was it quite a challenge in childhood trying to keep the secret from everybody?
Yeah, I would say it started in middle school when I wasn't quite covert yet, but I was realizing, that I could get made fun of, and then I could get looked at funny. And I actually had an instance, I guess it was in the third grade, because it was my first Holy Communion. I went to a Catholic school at the time, and they were doing a recording of it. And what we had to do was go up to the microphone at the altar, and all we had to do was state our names. And I remember going up there, and I was terrified, obviously, and it did not come out. It was a pretty tough one. It was a high. It was bad. Needless to say, that recording went on a VHS tape, and given to everybody and their families to have for the rest of their lives. And I think that was kind of a turning point for me, because I felt such shame and guilt and embarrassment. I just felt stupid. And I decided that I was going to do whatever it took from that point on to not show my stutter and to not let anybody know that I stutter. So I mastered it pretty well for many, many years, to the point where not even some of my closest friends knew that I stuttered. I even, a previous boyfriend from the past, I went about 2.5, 3 years without him knowing that I stuttered. Yeah, so I hid it pretty well. I think even some of my family members who were not so up to speed on stuttering kind of thought that it just went away because I just did so well at hiding it. You're on mute, Mike, I think.
Thank you. You would think I'd have that figured out by now.
Okay.
But what were some of your strategies for hiding it? Like, was it kind of the usual suspects when you thought you were about to stutter on something? You just say, "Yeah, I won't say that." Or if you were having a day where it felt we were having a day it felt more challenging, you would just sort of not go to that social event.
Yeah, so I had quite the bag of tricks. I was never one to actually avoid a gathering altogether. I'm super social and I love being around people. So some of the tricks that I used were I would change out words all the time. So for people who may not be aware of what that looks like, instead of saying pass me my water, if I felt that water wouldn't come out, I might quickly jump to, hey, pass me my drink or my cup, or something that I knew felt that would be easier to get out. I would just reword things. Sometimes I would speak, but I would just not say exactly what I wanted to say. I would use tricks like, or I would pretend to be thinking about what I was gonna say, like I didn't know, but in fact I knew, exactly what I wanted to say. I would pause a lot, which is, kind of a similar strategy to, pretending that I don't know what my next thought is. Yeah, all sorts of things.
I totally hear you. And was that pretty exhausting?
Yeah, it is very, very taxing. Yes. Yes.
And so you would go to the social situations. You wouldn't necessarily avoid the whole social situation, but you would oftentimes not say exactly what you wanted to say. And sometimes that doesn't have to change our meaning, right? I mean, if you're going to say have a wonderful day, but you think you're going to stutter on wonderful, you could say have a great day, and you're roughly saying the same thing. But would you oftentimes like just say something completely different than what you wanted to say just to get something out?
Right. No. Yeah, it would be similar. But like you said, it was just so exhausting up here. And I predicted that every day, and that would just make me even more tired. Or there were, certain situations, obviously, for people who stutter, one of our biggest challenges is always saying our name, right? So that was always one of the most dreaded things about, going somewhere where I didn't know people or whatever. And most times when people would introduce themselves to me, I would forget their names instantly because I was just, so in my head about getting my own name out that I couldn't think about anything else, right? So I would try to plan those things, like instead of waiting for a person to actually ask me what my name was, I would just kind of, jump in that conversation and say, oh, by the way, I'm Lisa. And then it would be horrible if it happened to be a time where they didn't hear me and they would be like, oh, what's your name again? And like, that is the ultimate worst. Yeah. So, I mean, all sorts of, situations like that.
And it's the worst because that fear of being exposed. I mean, it's nearly universal. You can never say anything's 100% universal, but it's nearly universal from talking with tons of folks that stutter, and my own experience, especially in those, those younger years before coming to a point of like just a mentality like, screw it, I'm going to talk, and if they have a problem with my stutter, they can hang out with
Sure.
somebody else. But that's not our natural default position, right? It's a shameful one. It's a sort of desperately trying to appear normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
But it's interesting that we would rather, well, for example, my freshman year of high school, I, after giving a speech earlier in the year on Genghis Khan, where I got up and said Genghis Khan was, and I couldn't get born out, and I couldn't think of another word for born.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Are there any good ones? Like arrived on this planet, like
yeah.
like an alien being dropped off, or emerged from his mom, or I still don't know what the word would be there. And so after maybe 2 minutes of trying to get born out, just kind of silent blocking, like that for 2 minutes, I just sat down. And then after that experience, a couple of months later, I had to give another presentation in science class, or an invention. It was the handy cooler was mine. Not a particularly good invention, but going into that, I was like, all right, I got to do something different than the Genghis Khan speech, because that didn't work out so well.
Right.
So I was like, okay, the only thing I know I can say is, I can always say,
Always, right?
Right?
Always.
So I was like, okay. So when I hit a tough patch, I'm just going to say, and maybe the universe will be friendly to me and let me get the word out. And so I ended up saying, maybe 400 times in a 15-minute speech. And
yeah.
so it was literally like I was explaining something on the handy cooler invention. I'd be like, and this is the, like 14 in a row. And so in retrospect, it's actually way better just to be, a kid who stutters, who, has some blocks, but, is coherent when he explains what he's trying to explain. But it looked like, right? And no one saw me block during that speech. They just heard me say, a ridiculous number of times. And so one of our fears, at least in childhood and oftentimes beyond, is that people are going to think we're stupid. Mm-hmm. Right? I think, with most of us. And it certainly wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in reality, saying 400 times in 15 minutes actually makes you look far less intelligent than just
agreed.
Being a kid with a stutter. But for whatever reason, we, many of us get in that mentality where we'd rather be seen as anything other than a person that stutters.
I know. It's crazy. And I think of, I'm just now thinking of a couple other things. I mean, I used to take it so far. If I was at a restaurant and I wanted something on the menu and couldn't say it, I would just order something completely different that I knew that I could say. And I think about also all the times, you know, in middle school specifically, where we used to have to go around the room and read, you know, paragraphs, and it would go in order, like of our seats and our rows. And every day it would get to the person before me, and I would just get up and go to the bathroom every single day. And I would give myself such anxiety knowing that there was a chance that when I got back from the bathroom, that she would come, you know, back to me and say, oh, it's, you know, your turn, you know, you were skipped or whatever. It's just crazy. Yeah. But I'll tell you about some of my mindset changes that I made after going to the American Institute for Stuttering when we get there.
And so when was the most challenging period of childhood? I mean, I know you had the experience with your confirmation.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say the majority of middle school in general. I was lucky enough to not be, you know, brutally teased. I would say, you know, I definitely still got teased and, you know, mocked, but it was kind of more in a, like a friendly manner where, you know, people just thought they were being funny, not really knowing how much it was affecting me on the inside. But yeah, I would just say a big chunk of middle school in general, probably, you know, second grade to maybe sixth or seventh grade, which was, you know, kind of when I really started to master hiding it.
Gotcha. And so you then kind of stayed in that phase of, we'll call it successfully hiding it from
Mm-hmm.
maybe late middle school, early high school, all the way until you were 30 years old or so?
Yeah, I mean, through college and everything, you know, when I was in college, you know, I would actually just talk to most of my professors on the side, and most of them actually let me give my presentations in, you know, private. I requested that, and it was, you know, typically granted. And then, like I said, I was pretty good at hiding it at that point. So yes, if I had to do a, you know, presentation in front of a small class, it was definitely stressful, but I got through it, and it wasn't, you know, a nightmare, you know, if you will.
And so there was a sense then that even those that were close around you, like, you know, like your boyfriend for a few years, or I would assume, say, friends that you had in college, or into your 20s after college. I mean, they didn't know.
A lot of them didn't know. And my best friend from college, who I'm actually still best friends with, you know, to this day, she became really good at, you know, knowing what I needed. So for example, if we were going to a college party or to meet new people, you know, she would always make sure to say, oh, this is Lisa, or, you know, help me order something, or yeah. So I always had and still have her, but the majority of people did not know. Mm-mm.
And was it uh, through those years, was it still, you'd wake up in the morning thinking, what do I have to do today? How am I going to hide this? I mean, was that a major focus of your daily life?
Yeah. And it still sort of is. I don't want to say major, but yeah, I mean, it still crosses my mind throughout the day, every day. I don't, get up dreading the day like, oh my goodness, like, what do I have to, hide from today? Or, how do I hide it today? But, it still comes up in situations like going to get a coffee and having to, having to order the coffee and having them ask me for my name. Um, it's not a 10 out of 10 stressful anymore, but I'd still say it's about a 5, like, or a 6. Yeah, just, day to day situations where I'm just like, ugh, yeah.
Wishing that you didn't, you know, that you didn't have to deal with it. It's enough of,
Yeah.
it's not like completely terrifying and debilitating anymore, but it's
Right.
still fairly annoying.
Yeah. Yeah. Super annoying.
I,
Yeah.
I hear you. So the change that happened when you were around 30, well,
hmm
so prior to that age, had you done any kind of, well, either speech therapy or just spending time with getting to know other people that stutter?
So yes to the therapy. I did a small stint of it in grade school, around the ages like 10 to 12. Um, I pretty much hated it because, the techniques that I was taught in those sessions, I didn't think were realistic for the real world. For example, she would tell me that I had to do these, breathing through my words, and I would have to talk all soft. And I was like, that's just not gonna, work. So I tried that for a couple of years and then just told my mom that I just, wanted to end it. Um, in terms of talking to people who stutter, I had never in my life talked to anyone who stuttered until about 5 years ago, ever.
And was that a game changer when you started meeting other folks that stutter?
Yes, it changed my life. Absolutely, yeah.
And and this is always something I'm interested to hear. Do you know why, or did it just sort of worked almost? Well, you're a psychology major, like psychological magic almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing was the cliche, I'm not alone, um, type of thing. Because even though I did have, my handful of people that I could talk to, like my best friend or my mom or, my boyfriend at the time who finally knew. And they were all great and, always very supportive, and I'm, grateful for that. But they still can't really understand if you're not a person who stutters. Nobody can. I mean, they can try as hard as they want, but it's just not the same as talking to someone who actually goes through all the same things.
That was my experience also. Um, and I've noticed you go into a meeting of other people that stutter, and even if you've never met any of them before that, you understand something very deep about each other, right? That goes back to childhood in the
Yeah.
majority of cases.
Mm-hmm.
And something that's occurred to me is that when I started hanging out with other people that stuttered, and for a long time I kind of avoided that because I figured it might kind of be a pity party with people like crying on each other's shoulders, and I just didn't want to, like, that sounded like a downer, but I was wrong about what happens, at least the vast majority of what happens. Uh, and something I realized is that people that stutter, as it turns out, I like them every bit as much as I like my fluent friends,
Sure.
if not
Mm-hmm.
more in many cases. And that perhaps is powerful for us to realize, because our tendency, maybe our natural default thing to think, is that our stutter makes us less cool, less desirable, less intelligent sounding, less, A through Z pretty much. We think it makes us less. At least that's what
Yeah.
our mind is sort of telling
Mm-hmm.
us. And so when you go realize, wait a second, these people are cool and they're awesome,
Yeah.
and that kind of reflects sort of back at us to some extent, like, wait a second, maybe I'm not as less than
Mm-hmm.
other people as I thought. And
Yeah.
maybe this isn't that huge of a deal, because this person, that person, they're all great to hang out
Mm-hmm.
with. Yes, I have to be a little more patient when I listen to them, but other than that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they're cool. And like you said, only people that stutter can really get it, right? Even the most empathetic, open-minded, great listeners,
Yeah.
you know,
Doesn't matter.
right? Yeah, there's no way to sort of know the terror and know all the mental gymnastics that happen and all that stuff unless you've been there or done that.
Yeah. Mental gymnastics is a really, really great analogy. I don't know that I've ever heard that, but that's incredible.
Well, I mean, it's amazing how much mental energy
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes goes into, I mean, especially when you're being really really covert, right? Where you're having
Oh,
to
mhm.
scan the room,
Yeah.
predict the future, right?
Mhm.
Like, is this person walking over about to ask my name? If so, I need to act like I'm looking over here and I don't pay it, like I don't see them, or
Mhm.
all those things. And, being social, I mean, you talk to fluent speakers, being social is challenging enough without
Exactly.
having
Yeah, it's true.
massive,
Mhm.
layered on top,
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so when you got to 30 or so is when you first, um, well, when you went to AIS, is that when you first started meeting other people that stutter?
Yeah. So it was a few months before my 30th birthday, and I was tired of being tired all the time. And I got blood work done, and I slept really great, and I was, working out and taking care of myself, eating well, and I was just tired all the time. And just kind of realizing after all these years that I lacked energy pretty often for no real reason. Um, and that's when it pretty much hit me that it was all, up here that was just exhausting me physically. And for the first time ever, I got on the computer and just Googled stuttering. I mean, I honestly, like, I didn't know anything about stuttering. I didn't even know that, females are so much less likely to be stutterers than males. I didn't know, how many, percentage of the population that actually stutters. I didn't know anything. And I remember clicking on a video of a person. I don't think it was a podcast, but they were talking about their stuttering. And they had a really hard stutter, and I actually cracked up laughing. It was this really sort of uncomfortable and foreign thing to me. And especially because I hadn't let a really big, gruesome stutter like that out since I was a kid. So it was really strange. And I came across AIS and I saw that they had an intensive program. And I saw that, their goal was not for you to be fluent. They are not trying to cure you. They're not trying to give you tips to be fluent. It was all about, sort of mindset and perspective and just learning how to be a better communicator. So this was around September or October. I reached out to them and I had sort of, I don't want to say like an interview, but they just kind of, do a Skype call with you to see kind of where you're at and all that. And the next thing I knew, I booked to do the program in January. It was a 2-week-long intensive program. So I flew across the country. I was in New York for a couple of weeks, and I did this program there, and it turned my life around. And actually, prior to AIS, I think I went to 1 or 2 support groups here in Vegas. So in between that first, Google search and going to the program, I went to 2 support groups and I met people who stuttered for the first time ever. And it was so weird. I was like, what is happening? I can't believe other people stutter. I can't believe there are other people that live in the same city that I do that actually stutter. Like, it was just weird. So I went to the program, it drastically opened my eyes. Going back to what you said earlier, one of the things that we did there was, these activities and these exercises that made me realize that you do in fact look so much sillier when you say or or you do these things with your hands, or you look off into space, than just holding that direct eye contact with a person and just getting through the stutter. And we even had to spend some time looking at ourselves in the mirror and stuttering, which was pretty eye-opening. and we had to go out in public, and we had to purposefully let out a really big stutter to strangers. So, you know, let's just say we had to go in a grocery store and you had to ask where the chicken was. And you would have to be like, hi, can you tell me where the and like they wanted you to make it as awful as you possibly could to pretty much, you know, desensitize yourself and realize like nothing's going to happen if you stutter. Nothing. Like, you're not going to die. People are not going to run away from you. Like, nothing is going to happen. So that was, you know, pretty awesome. And, you know, one of the final things that was optional was riding the train in New York City and announcing like out loud on the subway car that you are a person who stutters. And that was the craziest thing ever. And they got that on videotape, and I used that video as my coming out, if you will. And I left that program being like, I stutter. Like, I just didn't care. And I wanted to tell everybody. And I was like, wow, I can't believe I've been hiding from this my whole life. Now, that enthusiasm has for sure, you know, diminished a tad since that program. But the program for sure did change my life in a lot of very big ways. Yeah.
And it sounds like it kind of sort of uncovered that the real world, you know, the world of people out there are actually not as mean and as not accepting of a person with a stutter as our mind had always been telling us they were. I mean, I used to think, you know, the world's never going to accept this. They're never going to take what I have to say seriously,
Mm-hmm.
as long as I'm stuttering. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's just not true. I mean, the vast majority of people, fluent folks, or you know, they don't care. I mean, it's not. So if we stutter on a word, it's not like they walk around the rest of their day thinking, "Oh, that guy, he couldn't even say that word." Right? People are much more absorbed into their own stuff
It's true.
than they are into our stuff.
It's true. They just don't care.
Well, that, and they don't necessarily notice it near as much as we think they do,
Mm-hmm.
because now obviously, you know, like a big, you know, drawn out block is something that people notice, but they don't,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they just want to hear what we have to say in the vast majority of
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah.
You know, and they might be thinking about, you know, what are they going to have for dinner, or what do they need to do tomorrow, or whatever. You know, they're just way more into their own things usually than they are into our things. And so when we realize that actually our shame and our feelings about you know, how much of a disaster for our life our stutter is, when we realize, you know, it's actually not the end of civilization. You know, like you said, Earth keeps spinning.
It's true.
You know,
It's true. Like, yeah. And, you know, on the other side of that too, even if you do run into those, you know, few select people who aren't the most understanding, or they're, mean, or they laugh, or whatever it is, right? I mean, they're they're pretty rare, but they're out there, right? Just to realize that, who cares? Like, they're not people that we want in our lives anyway, or they're, not people that are going to have an impact on our, lives, or what we do anyway. So if we happen to encounter those people, just kind of, learning and growing to just, brush them off.
Right, and it's more a reflection on them.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
On us.
Yeah.
Right, and yeah, but you're right, that desensitization is so key, right? And I know that's a revelation, and this is something I actually had done for me when I know you're a Florida State grad. I went to Florida State,
Mm-hmm.
well, and something when I was there, the guy that ran the speech language pathology department was a guy named Richard Ham,
Mm-hmm.
and that was something that he made me do, for speech therapy. He didn't even introduce any technique at first, just brought me around and made me talk to people.
Yeah.
And I remember it being like a lightning bolt. Like, wait a second, people will just sit there and listen, and then I'll just answer my question like I didn't even stutter.
Yeah.
Those people just act nice. I mean, they probably notice it, but
Yeah.
act, and that was a game changer. And then I was like, wait, so that means I can just say what I want in this world. I had no idea that was the case.
Yeah. And another thing is too, when, doing that, if you happen to get a person, back to the coffee shop example, right? If, I'm sure you've heard this as well. Many of us have. If you're trying to give your name and you can't get it out, and they say, "Oh, what did you forget your name?" Instead of just shrugging that off like I used to, now learning to just advertise, just giving them a nice little a smile, and just saying, "No, I stutter," that's it. And just kind of educating them so that you can prevent that from happening to another person, who stutters or has maybe a different, different speech impediment. And just kind of being a little bit easier on people, instead of getting angry in a situation like that, just realizing that maybe I'm the first person ever that they've heard, who stuttered. I mean, I went 30 years not ever talking to a person who stuttered, right? So just knowing they just don't have the experience or knowledge in that area. So just telling them that I stutter, and hoping that prevents them from saying that to somebody else in the future.
I totally agree. And when we speak up, and it doesn't have to be a monologue. We can just say, no, I didn't forget my name.
Mm-hmm.
I have a stutter.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it takes a little longer for it to come out.
Yeah.
And almost always you can see them like, oh, no, that's fine. I'm sorry. It's fine. Like they quickly realize what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. And
Really.
at first, they say that because they don't know what's going on. So they think, maybe you're whatever, they have no idea. And now they know. And so the way I look at it is when we just kind of let that go, and we don't say anything, so that confusion just sort of hangs in the air. Going forward, at least in my case, when I walk away from that situation, my respect for myself goes down a little bit. Whereas when I say, no, I have a stutter, right?
Yep.
And then my respect for myself actually increases. So it's either going one direction or the other, at least in my experience.
Absolutely.
And obviously, self-respect, the amount of respect that we have for ourselves, is a crucial part of living a good life.
Yeah, no, and boosting our confidence as well. Yeah, yeah,
Right. And knowing, like you said, knowing that we are helping to educate that person. Um,
hmm
and especially if they're a little embarrassed, which usually people are when they realize that they were just kind of not being nice, like, I was the asshole there, right? When they realize
yeah, yeah,
that, that tends to make an impact. And so, knowing that, like you said, you're making it easier for the next person, and especially somewhere like a Starbucks or a coffee shop where they ask people's name all day long, they're
mhm,
probably going to encounter over
yeah,
time some more people that stutter,
mhm,
uh, right? Or maybe they'll meet somebody at some point and stuttering will come up and they'll say, yeah, I met a person that stuttered once, and
yeah,
now you're just adding to the knowledge base essentially of people.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really to the point now where if something like that happens, and I just happen to have a moment and 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 not advertise, I'll actually feel like guilty about it afterwards. Like, no, like I need to, prevent that from happening to somebody else.
Yes, so you're literally an advocate.
Yeah,
You're, you know, kind of a warrior on behalf of all of us when you do that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's awesome. Um, and so you mentioned that some of the feeling from the AIS course it changed your life, but there's
Mhm.
still that, and I'm sure it was kind of a high almost, or a new world had opened up to you during those 2 weeks. Um, and was that a group therapy? Like, were other people there that were going through it at the same time with
Yeah, there were probably 10 of us, I would say. And, we all stuttered very differently, and we all had different mindsets, and it was really, cool to go through that with them. And, I was so inspired from this that I actually came back and I took the role of the chapter leader for the support group here in, Vegas. Um, and we do that every month. And, I find my support uh, through them now.
Nice. And is that always when you have a meeting, it's kind of affirming, or it's kind of almost like hitting a reset button or something? I
Yeah.
feel when I go to when I spend time with other folks that stutter, it yeah, it's just a reminder, because obviously stuttering can feel very isolating
hmm
and very you know like we're out there on an island without anybody else. And
Yeah.
uh, like what you said, that was my experience too. I mean, I don't know that I've ever just randomly met somebody else in life that stuttered, and I was, pretty severe, or I had a pretty good stutter, as I like to call it,
hmm
for a long time, and that never seeing anybody else that talks like you.
Hmm.
Humans are very obviously social animals, and it's just a powerful thing to be around folks that stutter, and then to reinforce it by doing it with some regularity.
Yeah, yeah, and our group has a Facebook group, and even small things like today, one of our members posted in there, "Hey guys, I have a presentation for work on the phone today. I'm stressed about it. I'm just gonna do it, get it over with. Whatever." Um, and we all obviously, gave him the support that he was hopefully needing. Um, and obviously I don't wish him to be anxious today for that call, but it kind of gives me a sense of like, yeah, like I'm not the only one. Like, these people are going through the same sorts of, things that I am. Um, not not having to do a presentation obviously, but I have a new person in my life right now that I've been wanting to tell for a couple months, and I haven't been able to yet. So
Right. Realizing that the way we feel and the challenges we have are not in any way unique to us, right? In fact, from my experience, they're pretty universal. And so,
mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a real game changer. Realizing that actually, the way we react to these things and the way we feel is actually very normal. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
as evidenced by the fact that almost everybody that has the condition has these super similar emotions and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
but, so it's about time to wrap it up, Lisa. But if you could talk to your, say, 9-year-old self,
Mm.
10-year-old self, going into those challenging years, what would be something that you wished someone had told you at that age?
Um, Pretty much that it's okay to stutter. That it's only one teeny tiny piece of the person that I am, and that it's not going to prevent me from doing anything in my life that I want to do, or from people loving and accepting me for who I am.
That's good
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
good note to end on. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed talking to you, and
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Mike.
my pleasure. And have a good one. We'll talk to you later.
You too. Okay.
So,
Bye.
take care.